Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Gray. I want to talk to you about experiment number 3. Now, if you're a fan of the band 311, well, then this is the lab for you because the title is All Mixed Up, Don't Know What to Do. That's a song of theirs, which I believe is called Mixed Up. Now, the reason that this lab is called Mixed Up or All Mixed Up is because of the fact that this is all about separations. Now, this lab kind of has two components to it. The first component is relating to parts 1 and 4 of this experiment. If you'll notice on pages 46 and on page 49, you'll find the data sheets for parts 1 and part 4. Part 2 and part 3 are all about the separations. Okay. Before we get ahead of that ourselves though, this experiment has you walk through some calculations. This experiment has you draw your data sheets. Now, our calculation for this week is all about percent composition. And basically, percentage of a mixture that is one material or the other. Now, for this week's experiment, first of all, I'm going to talk about parts 2 and part 3. Now, these two different parts, their data sheets are found on pages 47 and 48, 47 for part 2 and 48 for part 3. Our two different components or our two different mixtures are sand and steel BBs, basically, or steel beads. Now, these steel beads, well, they're magnetic. Sand is not magnetic. So you're going to get a mixture of these two things, and you're going to use a magnet and a beaker, and you're going to pour the sand into another beaker. So you're going to get approximately 2 grams of this mixture. You're going to want to make sure that you thoroughly mix this material or thoroughly mix this mixture up so that there's an even distribution of the steel beads and the sand. You're going to use a magnet, pour off the sand, and now you've separated those two things. Okay, so the way that we're going to look at this calculation, or we're going to look at the calculation shown on page 38, is through the lens of this mixture. So what you're going to do is you're going to get approximately 2 grams of this mixture. You're going to need to record the total mass of that mixture. So I'm going to say it's 2.08 grams. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go through my procedure and pour off the sand and determine the sand that was in here. And I'm going to use that to put on top of this. So let's say that my sand accounted for 1.64 grams of my total mass. I'm going to do 1.64 divided by 2.08, 1.64 divided by 2.08, and that is 0.7884. I'm going to multiply that number by 100. The reason for that is so I can deal with the percentage. And my answer is going to be 3 significant digits because I only had 3 significant digits. So my answer is 78.8%. So what that means is 78.8% of that mixture was sand. Well, you can use deductive reasoning and you can say, well, the remaining percentage was therefore my steel beads. But you also have those steel beads separated. So you could say, whatever the mass of that is, determine the mass of that, and then say the total mass of my sand was 2.08, multiplied by 100. And your number should be very close to the 78, or sorry, it should be very close to approximately 31.2, but it may or may not be. There might be some variation with your mass. You might have lost some of the sand in the transfer, in the pouring of it into your other beaker. There might be something experimentally that, maybe went wrong. So whatever this mass is, you want to actually determine the mass of the steel. And so if you could say like, okay, it's 0.49 grams. Well, determine what that actually is. So then you'd have a approximate percent error. Okay, so that's what you're going to do for part 2. You're going to do that a total of 3 times. This doesn't require much washing or anything like that. It just requires you to weigh a sample, separate that sample, weigh the products, and just continue doing that over and over again. Do it a total of 3 times. Okay, now part 3, on the other hand. This is something that you and your group are going to do one time. You're going to have a total of 3 data sets, though, because you're going to get from your peers. Okay, so this is a mixture of sand and chalk, or CaCO3. Now, neither of these are magnetic, so you don't have that physical, easy separation. However, in the presence of HCl, a chemical reaction takes place. Sand does not react with HCl. Calcium carbonate, on the other hand, does. What it's going to do is it's ultimately going to separate into 2 ions, the Ca2 plus calcium ion and the CO3 minus, or CO3 2 minus carbonate ion. That carbonate ion is going to break down into CO2 and O2. Whenever that breaks down, a gas is going to be released. What's going to be left behind is calcium ions, which are soluble in solution. So what you'll be able to do is take this mixture of sand and calcium carbonate, add HCl to it, and you're going to do this in a piece of glassware known as an evaporating dish, which looks a little bit like that. Looks like a construction worker's helmet flipped upside down, but it's small and ceramic. At the bottom here, you're going to have sand, and you're going to have this solution, that HCl that you've added. You're going to see bubbles emerge because that calcium carbonate is going to react with HCl. Carbon dioxide gas is going to be released, and all that's going to be left down here is the sand. Now you might be wondering, but where are the calcium ions? Well, the calcium ions, like I said, they're soluble, so they are scattered throughout your solution. So you're going to do a separation technique known as decanting. So you'll pour off this solution into this other beaker, and you can discard this solution in your liquid waste container. But what that's going to mean is at the bottom of this, you're going to have a bunch of sand at the bottom of your evaporating dish. Put your evaporating dish, after you've rinsed that sand off with water from a squirt bottle, put that onto a hot plate, evaporate all the water, then put this on a digital balance to determine the mass of the sand. You will do basically the same calculation. Mass of the mixture, which is about 2.0 grams. The mass of the sand, which you have determined and collected here. We're not going to be recovering any of the calcium carbonate, so basically we will deduce what the mass of the calcium carbonate was originally by subtracting from, or by taking the difference of our 2.0 grams from the mass of our sand. You'll then be able to determine approximate percentage of the sand and the calcium carbonate. Okay, so that's how you're going to do parts 2 and 3. Now, part 1, you're going to be taking a coffee filter, which, if everyone's seen a coffee filter, a paper coffee filter here, we've got these kind of ridged edge, or ridged like periphery. These are called, or this is kind of the baffled portion of the coffee filter. Now that looks like an eyeball. That's not supposed to look like an eyeball. But what we want to preserve is this center part. The reason for this is this coffee filter is something that you can use for filtering materials from one another. What we want to do is we want to tear off this exterior, this peripheral region. We want to preserve this small portion in the middle. What you're going to do is you're going to put this in DH2O, deionized water. You're going to submerge it in there, and you're actually going to do this 3 times. You're going to do this with 3 different pieces of coffee filter. You're going to submerge all of them in DH2O. Now, What we want to do is we want to figure out what's the best way to dry this coffee filter. And the reason that you want to figure this out is because many times whenever you separate materials from one another, you have to recover them, dry them, and figure out what the components or what the masses are of the dried components. So this first one, what we're going to do is we're going to determine the mass of water that this was actually absorbed or was actually absorbed. This is on page 46. You're going to fill in this data. You're going to place this on a watch glass. And then you're going to do a total of 3 different treatments. You're going to put this into the oven for 15 minutes. You're going to put the second one on your bench top so it won't be agitated, also for 15 minutes. And then the third one, you're going to spray with ETOH or ethanol, and you're going to incubate that for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes have expired, on page 48, you're going to record the masses of this mixture. And you're going to determine what percent difference the mass was from original to after 15 minutes. Okay, you're going to do this again after another 15 minutes. You're not going to, what I mean by that is you're just going to put this back into the oven. You're going to put this back on your tabletop, your bench top, into that nice place where it wasn't being irritated. You're not going to spray this with ethanol again. So I'm just going to write ETOH, but then I'm going to cross a line through it because we're not spraying with ethanol again. So then this will give us a 30-minute time point. We're going to do it one last time. So again, we're going to measure our mass and everything like that. Then we're going to do it for a third time, measuring the mass after what will be a total of 45 minutes. So 3 15-minute intervals. And ultimately, what we want to be able to do, if you look at the bottom of page number, what we ultimately want to be able to do is say, what is the best way to dry this sample? Is it to put it in the oven? Is it to leave it at your bench top? Or is it to spray it on ethanol and leave it on your bench top? All right, so this wraps up parts 1 through 4 of your procedure. There are also several reflection questions that you'll need to take care of with respect to your results. So, why do you want to remove the baffles from your coffee filter? Well, it's less to dry is one component or one thought. So work through those procedures or work through those reflections, and I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a good one.